What's going on, guys? SMH Super Mario Hoops back with some more hoops. Today, we're in part 8. Part 8 of 10 in the series. Only 2 more episodes after this. But, so let's get the teams 30 to 21 that we want to see in NBA 2K20. Let's get it. At 30, we got the 1989-1990 Philadelphia 76ers. This team was led by their all-star power forward Charles Barkley. You also had Hersey Hawkins at the shooting guard spot, not a bad scorer. Rick Mahorn was a bruiser down low. And then you also had Mike Jaminski, who was pretty good offensively and also a good rebounder. Johnny Dawkins was a really good distributor on this team. And then Ron Anderson was a pretty solid 6-man for them. 53-29 record. They got the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. Unfortunately, they lost in the East semifinals. But I think, assuming Charles Barkley is in the game, which is not really likely, but if he were in the game, we would definitely need to see a Philadelphia 76ers Barkley team. At 29, we got the San Antonio Spurs from 1982-1983. George Gervin was the star on this team. You also had Artis Gilmore, who was still an all-star caliber player at that time. Mike Mitchell, who actually averaged about 20 points per game this season. Gene Banks was not a bad shooting guard for this team, and Johnny Moore was a pretty good distributor as well. Edgar Jones was mainly the 6th man on this team, and they also had Mike Dunleavy Sr. as well. A 53-29 record for this team, and they actually had some pretty good postseason success. They got all the way to the Western Conference Finals. Unfortunately, they came up just short. They lost in 6, but a team with George Gervin and Artis Gilmore, that's a pretty good dynamic duo. And then also Mike Mitchell wasn't that bad. I would love to see that team in 2K. At 28, we get the 1978-1979 Seattle Supersonics. This team was led by Dennis Johnson, who became the Finals MVP this year. Gus Williams was the leading scorer, though, for the squad. Jack Sikma was a pretty solid big man, pretty good rebounder. Lonnie Shelton, pretty much the same thing, just not as good of a scorer. John Johnson was the starting small forward. And Fred Brown was really a starting caliber shooting guard off the bench, kind of like Lou Williams. The team was 52-30 on the regular season, and in the postseason, they got all the way to the NBA Finals and won the only championship for the Supersonics to this day. So I think with that in mind, their only championship team, I've already put the Trailblazers on here. So, why not do the same with the Seattle Supersonics? At 27, we got the 2007-2008 Utah Jazz. This team was led by Darren Williams, who was a young point guard showing his promise. You also had Carlos Boozer, who was an all-star for the season. Andre Kirilenko, who was always a really good defensive player and a pretty good, kind of like a jack-of-all-trades type of player, really. You also had Mehmet Okur, who was actually an all-star this season as well. And to round out the starting lineup, you had Ronnie Brewer. Now off the bench, they had Kyle Korver, who was a sharpshooter. They had a really young but still pretty good Paul Millsap. And they also had CJ Miles as well. The team was 54-28 on the regular season, got the 4 seed. They lost in the West semifinals, however, but I think that the team with all this talent like Darren Williams, Carlos Boozer, Kirilenko, and a pretty nice bench like Paul Millsap and Kyle Korver as well, I think they deserve a spot on this list for sure. At 26, we have the 1961-1962 Philadelphia Warriors. Now, this season is most notably known for Wilt Chamberlain averaging 50 points a game and also dropping 100 in one game. So I would just love to see a Wilt Chamberlain so dominant in the game. You also have Paul Arizin, who actually averaged 21 points per game for this team. And then everyone else was all right. Tom Gola was okay. So was Tom Meshery. You also got Guy Rogers at the point guard. And actually, Al Ados was pretty good off the bench. The team was 49-31, though, for the regular season. They did lose in the East Finals in 7, which is unfortunate for them. But I just feel like a really dominant Wilt Chamberlain. And also, Paul Arizin was not that bad, so it's not like it'd just be a one-man show. That team definitely deserves a spot on this top 100 list. At 25, we got the Boston Celtics from 1973-1974. This team was led by John Havlicek, who would become the Finals MVP later this season and was the leading scorer for them. Dave Cowens actually was the regular season MVP, though. You also have JoJo White, who was a perennial All-Star. Paul Silas, who was a very good player in his prime. You also had Don Chaney, who was a quality shooting guard in the league. Don Nelson, who was actually a Hall of Famer when it was all said and done. And then also Paul Westphal on the bench. The team was 56-26 in the Eastern Conference, which got them the first seed. They got all the way to the finals, and they won against the Bucks in 7 games, which gave them a championship. So I think there isn't really a team with this core, with Dave Cowens and JoJo White. Obviously, John Havlicek's on the other Celtics team. But I mean, it would be interesting to see this team put into the game. At 24, we had the 1975-1976 Phoenix Suns, which was a very surprising team, honestly. Paul Westphal was the leading scorer on this team and the go-to guy. Alvin Adams was right up there, too, as the second option and also a pretty good rebounder. Then they had 2 forwards who were basically double-double machines, one being Gar Hurd and the other one being Curtis Perry. And then they had some pretty nice role players like Dick Van Arsdale, who played the shooting guard spot for them. And then on the bench, they had Keith Erickson as well as John Schumann, who were both pretty good scorers for them as well. The team was pretty abysmal in the regular season, only 42-40. They got the 4 seed in the West, but as I said, they were very surprising. Somehow made the NBA Finals, which was actually the first time the Suns had ever made the Finals. Unfortunately, though, they lost to the Boston Celtics. But honestly, if you haven't even seen that series between the Celtics and the Suns from 1976, I encourage you to actually look it up and watch some of the highlights, because some of those games were pretty crazy, to be honest. But this team was pretty surprising, kind of overachieved, you could say. So I think they got to be on this list. At 23, we got the 2013-2014 San Antonio Spurs. Obviously, this team still had the big 3, in which all of them were very productive at this point. But they had also the Finals MVP, which was a young Kawhi Leonard as well. The team also had pretty good role players, such as Danny Green, who was a good 3-and-D guy. Marco Bellinelli was a good 3-point shooter. Patty Mills as a backup point guard. And Boris Diaw, like I've said before, he could basically do just about anything. The team was 62-20 on the regular season, got the first seed in the Western Conference, and basically after the year before blowing the finals in 7, that Game 6, which was always a nightmare for them in 2013, they basically came back and just stomped the Heat and won in 5. So I think with all that, and I mean the fact that there's a Kawhi Spurs team, and you still got the big 3 as well, I think that this is definitely a team that deserves a spot in 2K for being one of the greatest we've seen. At 22, we got the 2016-2017 Boston Celtics. This was the season that Isaiah Thomas averaged nearly 30 points a game and just went crazy. Avery Bradley was a really good 3-and-D player at this point. Jay Crowder was a really good defender as well. Amir Johnson, who was the starting power forward for this team, and then Al Horford, who was still an all-star caliber player. He was not an all-star, though, for this season particularly. Marcus Smart, who was a ferocious defender for the squad. Kelly Olynyk, who came up big, especially in Game 7 against the Wizards in the second round that year. And they also had young guys like Jaylen Brown was a rookie at this point, and then Terry Rozier, who had only been in the league for just a few years as well. 53-29 record, which was actually good enough for the first seed in the Eastern Conference. They got all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals and eventually lost in 5. Part of that was because of Isaiah Thomas's hip injury, though, as well. But I just think that now with a lot of these guys being gone, outside of probably Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown, who's basically just a different player now, I think this is a completely different crew than we're seeing right now. So, I would like to see them in the game. At 21, we got the 2014-2015 Los Angeles Clippers. This is around the time they had the big 3 of Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. not to mention J.J. Redick, who averaged about 16 points per game as well. Matt Barnes was the starting small forward, and Jamal Crawford averaged 15 off the bench too. The team also had other bench players who were not bad, like Austin Rivers. They had Spencer Hawes, Hedo Turkoglu, Nate Robinson, and then even the big baby. So this team was 56-26 on the regular season, which was actually good enough for the 3 seed. They got to the second round. They were up 3-1. Unfortunately, though, they blew a 3-1 lead to the Houston Rockets. But even though they did blow that 3-1 lead, I still feel like this is the best Clippers team that we saw with Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan all a part of. So they definitely have to be on this list somewhere because now the Clippers look so different, and this team was very fun to watch back in the day. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. So we only got 2 parts left. The top 20 still remains left on the board. But tell me what you guys thought in the comments about the 21 through 30. Because I feel like now we're going to get in the teams that's like, okay, we need, like, we don't need all these teams, okay? I will admit myself, I'm being a little bit clickbait and saying we need 100 teams in 2K. But we do want 100 teams in 2K, of course, because the more the merrier, right? But yeah, so these next like teams that we're getting up to are basically teams that's like, how are they not in the game yet? So I mean, you guys will just have to keep watching to see who those teams are. And also, if you haven't already, you can follow me on other social media pages. I have an Instagram and a Twitter for my YouTube account, so those will be on the screen. If you want to follow me there, just, you know, go there and follow me. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that. But if you guys enjoy the series, be sure to keep tuning in for the next 2 episodes. And I think that's just about gonna do it. So I'm out. Peace.